see maybe one or two, and Rudolph none. That was my whole position.
Well, I was just impressed you said Ogunjobi's name so well. That was right off the tongue there. But
well, wait till we get to the segment on Tua. I will never say his last name.
But no, I think you're right. I thought he should get more than one game. You come down and hit a player with no helmet on in the back in a situation where he's standing there with his arms up and really isn't doing anything at that point. You talk about kind of the NBA spinoff where they've been looking at more of like the peacemaker. And we talked about the Ben Simmons where he had the reverse naked chokehold on Karl Anthony Towns a few weeks ago. And he actually got called a peacemaker at that point. But I don't think he went up and forearmed and knocked Karl Towns over in the back like he did at that point. So I thought he should have got more than one game. I thought Pouncey would get 2. I was a little surprised at 3, but I guess they don't want the image of a guy kicking another one in the head. That's starting to get into kind of a dangerous territory as well. So I understand that one, but I thought 2 was probably where it was going to be. So I was a little surprised at 3. And I thought Rudolph shouldn't get anything. I went over it. I thought that he wasn't the aggressor.
No.
And he did. Yes. Did he charge at him? Yes, but he doesn't have a helmet on, and Myles Garrett has a helmet and is holding your helmet. So in medieval times, if you're facing someone in full armor and a sword and you don't have either one and you run up to him, I mean, are you really going to be worried at that point? Or do you feel like you need to take the sword and whack the guy in the head with it? Like, he wasn't going to hurt him. He's giving up probably 30 pounds to him anyways?
At least.
And he doesn't have his helmet on, and you do, and you're holding his. He should have just thrown Rudolph's helmet down or chucked it or did something at that point and got himself out of that situation. Instead, he made a horrible decision. He might be a great guy. He might be a great community guy. I'm not saying to banish the man from the league and never let him play again. I am saying this is a moment where the league has to take a stand and set a standard so this does not happen again. You cannot have this happening in primetime games when everyone's eyes are on it. Yeah, if this was on a Sunday at the 1 o'clock spot where there's 8 or 9 games going, maybe it's not the circus that it was. But when it's these Thursday night, Sunday night, Monday night games where all eyes are on it, a playoff game, when everybody has their phone out and they're immediately tweeting and having these opinions and this goes viral, you have to make a stand to stop it. And that's what the league has to do. This is almost like hockey trying to get fighting out. You have to get this part of the game out. You cannot take a chance on a player swinging a helmet, cracking a guy in the head and killing him on national TV. He swings that thing and hits him in the temple, Eric. We could be having a completely different conversation to start this show.
I believe we are. And in fact, it's funny you say that because like we said earlier in the show, we were both going to head to bed. We were tweeting, okay, game's over. You know, what are you doing? Watching Lakers, watching flipping channels, whatever. Then we're both up till 12:31 a.m. just reading all the reaction of this cancel culture. And I wanted to kind of bring that up because you just did, in the fact that, yeah, I'm with you. I don't think he should be suspended for the rest of his career or anything like that. But it's funny when you read Twitter and you read the knee-jerk reactions. That is the type of culture we live in where it's deemed the cancel culture because you see it all the time. Oh, you know, President Trump made a phone call to Ukraine and it might be quid pro quo. He should never be allowed to be president again. You know, and we'll talk about Colin Kaepernick in a minute. I mean, these guys, you know, he should never be able to, Michael Vick should never be allowed to be in the league again because he was guilty of dogfighting and did his time in prison, but he still should never be allowed to be in the league. All this cancel culture, I'm not in on that. I believe, and I've said it on this show before, that people can have momentary lapses in judgment. There can be times when they do something and they pay the price for it. They do their time for the crime, and then they can be forgiven and you can move on. This is a situation where I think both players can be forgiven. Well, really all 4 of them, if you want to count Pouncey and Ogunjobi in there, they can all be forgiven. They can all continue their careers and move on. I think they both, and all of them, seem contrite about it, but there's a penalty to pay here for that. But this whole cancel culture thing is ridiculous. I don't think we need to get to that point on it, but every one of these guys, except for Mason Rudolph, needs to, you know, pay the appropriate time. And Justin, I'm just still on the side that the NFL just didn't get this time right. I think the scales are off.
It'll be interesting what they come up with, Garrett. I just feel like it's going to be this entire season and including any potential postseason games for the Browns. That's what I think it's going to end up being. For the Steelers, they lose Pouncey. I think that hurts them because somehow, as bad as the AFC is, they're still mathematically alive. But that offense is putrid, Eric, for the Steelers. And it goes back to what we've been talking about. Yeah, they made a run against some really bad teams, and then they caught a Rams team flying west to east, and just that's looked awful. And they were able to get a win, and all of a sudden it looked like, okay, maybe that trade for Minkah Fitzpatrick looked good. Now all of a sudden that offense is so bad, I don't see how you can trust the Steelers either going forward. So the Pouncey suspension really hurts them because it takes one of their most reliable offensive linemen off the field for 3 games when they need to get wins to stay in this thing. So it'll be interesting, Eric, how this plays out with Myles Garrett, what the suspension looks like. It'll also be how that's going to affect these two teams going forward, because the 6th spot in the AFC is wide open because you've got so many teams that are falling out. Injuries are there. Mm-hmm. And then we spin it to the other big story with the NFL that started taking place and coming out about this workout the NFL seemed to be throwing together for Colin Kaepernick. So I don't even want to get into, Eric, who's to blame for how this workout went down. Yeah, that's something we can get into. But watching this whole thing play out, does Colin Kaepernick even want to play in the NFL anymore? Or was this all just about keeping that martyr type of name recognition up for Kaepernick?
Well, I think you know what my position is going to be, because I think you and I have the same position, and we've talked about it on this show before. I think we've done some pretty significant.
Wait! You have to be Max Kellerman. You have to say Kaepernick is going to play, and everyone's a racist and all this stuff.
Hold on, let me pull up Jamel Hill's Twitter account so that I know what the talking points are supposed to be on this.
Or Josina Anderson, if she hasn't deleted it yet, because apparently Mason Rudolph's a racist 30 seconds after a play that she's in 15 states away. But that's another case. So, but no, please give me your honest take, because that's what we like to do here on Talkback, not First Take.
Yeah. So let me shut down Jamel Hill and Dan Lebitard and all these people that think Colin is still somehow the victim here. Look, I'm with Stephen A on this one, actually, and I was shocked this week to see guys like Stephen A and Marcellus. Yes, wow. He did. And I'm not always agreeing with Stephen A on things, and that's okay. We can agree to disagree on things, but Stephen A brought it. Marcellus Wiley brought it. I mean, Marcellus Wiley went out and called Kaepernick a fraud this past week. I mean, these are big statements from big names in broadcasting. So I think that, and what we were going to say here before, obviously this joking about Jamel Hill and stuff, it's all appropriate because it all plays into this. But you and I have ranted about this before, and it's this whole notion that he wants to be the victim because in the back of his head, somehow under that humongous mane of hair that he's got going, I don't even know how he gets that in a helmet at this point, but he doesn't want to play football, because if he does, it exposes how bad he really is. And if you dig in and the 19 or 20 people who ended up being there in Atlanta after he moved locations on it, they looked at it hopefully objectively, and they said his velocity's average. His long ball he could still throw it long, but his velocity's average. His accuracy is very average, and he can run. Yeah, that's what he's always been able to do. But they said he's no better now than he was when he was 1-11 and dropping out of the league. So to me, Justin, this isn't about football. He knows if he actually gets on a team, as he didn't want to do with, the American Football League or whatever, XFL and all these other things that people are throwing ideas around. He does not want to get back behind center and play quarterback because it'll expose him as a bad football player. That's the end result of this whole thing. And Stephen A, to his credit, brought it and said he isn't looking for a job. He's looking to be a martyr. He looked at, and Stephen A even talked about, and I know, these are details, right? And we may not dig into the weeds with this, but Stephen A looked at the organization and planning required to move this to a high school. You would have had to know that kind of stuff ahead of time. There were people in cap shirts and had posters and everything on the streets on the way in. Justin, people knew about this before the NFL did. They were apparently notified half an hour before of a location change that was 51 miles away. This whole thing was a total fraud, as Wiley said, and it's a total charade. This guy's not interviewing for a job. He just wants to be out in front of the media yet again to play the victim card. And look at his shirt. Kunta Kinte. Is he really comparing himself to a slave at this point? This guy makes me sick.
He doesn't want to play football. And we've been consistent on that since this broke and since he was out of the league. He doesn't want to play. And you hit it right there. His skills are at a point where if he goes into the league and he gets called into a game and he looks poor, that everybody is going to, all of his support's going to be running for the hills, are going to be using, well, he didn't get an opportunity, so he's rusty. Eric, to me, I actually watched the live YouTube stream of this because I wanted to see what he looked like. And to me,
sure,
this was 5 guys on spring break out on the beach trying to impress the girls sitting there watching them. It is no pads, no helmets, one guy. It is running all 9 routes. He's taking 7-step drops, taking his time, winding up and throwing the ball 40 or 50 yards down the field. Several of the ones I saw, they were underthrown. They had one throw in stride that I thought was probably his best throw. But
they're wobbly. Some of them were wobbling.
It was just throw rainbow moon shots and try to impress the girls. And this was clearly a publicity stunt for all the support that he has of people that don't watch football or started watching or supporting him just because of this cause. And they're like, wow, did you see how far he threw it? 45 yards and he hit the guy. Like, yeah, pretty much every guy can do that. High school kids can do that. What did we learn from that? Nothing. He can throw the ball far. You know what we did learn that was still the same? When a guy runs a crossing route that's 7 yards from him, he still throws the ball like he's trying to throw it 45 yards on a rope, which he put one right between the guy's hands because he still has 0 touch on the ball. No, he doesn't want to be there. He had someone with a camera right up underneath him, the whole thing. This was all about getting his name out there. Eric, you've talked about on the show, you just got a big promotion. You're involved now in hiring and building a team. All right. So you have a person that wants to interview for a spot. You go on LinkedIn, you check them out. You're like, I don't know. There's some sketchy stuff here. They seem to have some other things going on. I don't know if they're going to be all sold into this. They could be a distraction for my team, but you decide to grant an interview and the person calls you up a half hour before you're supposed to meet at the Hilton for your interview. And they go, I want to meet at the Marriott. And you get there and you go, here's the questions you're allowed to ask me. And you still do the interview. And the end of it, they go, you know what, Eric, don't be scared. Don't run. Hire me. Well,
yeah, right.
Do you think when you have 10 other candidates out there that's the person you're going to go, wow, yeah. I mean, they just questioned my manhood right in front of me, changed all the parameters. They won't be a distraction at all. They'll be super easy to work with and a great addition to my team. Hell no, you're not going to do that. I feel like he tried to do everything he could to destroy this whole thing. And it was like, well, I have 25 people coming. If I move locations, we're down to 8. And I'll tell the 4 that come to go back and tell their owners not to be scared to sign me. That pretty much will end my chances. But it keeps off this notion that I went out there and threw the ball really far and no one wants to take a chance on me. It's a complete joke, Eric.
And to top that off, I mean, I got to tell you, that analogy was perfect because I just spent the last week interviewing people and you really brought that home for me.
Did any of them change the venue for you?
No, because they wouldn't have been hired. I would tell you that right now. I would have called up the next person and said, are you close? So we can go a little early if you want.
I've heard that you have to be closing in sales. I've never heard that you call someone a coward for not doing what you asked them to do. I mean, I don't know if I'm going to try that tactic, but I mean, I guess it's worth it.
No, it's not worth it because he's not going to get employed. And I wouldn't employ someone who did that, let alone wear clothing that was offensive to me. You know, he just constantly wants to, I should stop. But anyway, look, here's the thing. You have apologists of him, and I'll bring her up again, Jemele Hill, who, look, she's a left-wing liberal whack job in my opinion, because she's always going to take the contrarian position that puts her in the front of the media stage so that they can keep her name relevant. I don't even know if she believes half of her positions or not, but maybe she does. And she's like, yeah, well, teams had 3 years to sign him. He doesn't owe them anything. Meanwhile, you've got Dan Levitard, who I think kind of about as much of him as I would think of mulch in my flower bed. It's like a pain to really deal with once a year, right? He has takes once in a while that I'm like, oh, okay, that's thought provoking. And then 99% of the other time, I can't stand him. He says that Kaepernick has a reason to distrust this league because they took 3 years of his career from him. Excuse me. They took 3 years of his career. How exactly did they